Today, Professor Anthony Gallucci from a school in Boulder, Colorado, named Naropa University. He's agreed to be my guest this evening, so I'm going to ask him some questions. My first question, Anthony, is it okay if I call you Anthony?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. How has your identity as a Black academic influenced your research and professional journey?
The academy, or the institutions of higher learning in our country, are, Eurocentric, or based around a Eurocentric framework, which appears to be inherently racist or marginalizing towards the Black aspect of my identity. So participating in the system that is harmful has a somatic impact, right? Brings up past traumas, brings up fear, anxiety, and leads to a sort of apathy or fatigue over time. That being said, my Blackness also encourages me to support other BIPOC and Black folks specifically in their traversing of this often minimizing experience in higher education. The study of the mind and its functioning in various contexts is made better by researching, applying information to modalities from a diverse population, and specifically in the context of today's discussion, by adding the Black mind and the Black context as a valuable and legitimate way of functioning to the breadth of wisdom that we're putting together around the experience of humanity in this way. So I feel honored to be able to add to our data pool on what it is to function with the mind and the body and the spirit as human beings from the Black perspective.
Thank you. You mentioned Naropa University. I'm going to bring you there. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think Naropa can do to combat racism, and also what can the students do that go to Naropa to combat racism?
Well, there was historically, maybe about a decade ago almost now, a little less, there was a sit-in on the green at the Arapahoe campus, and students protested against racial discrimination and other forms of marginalization that occurred. The action that took place there did lead to the Diversity Center, Cultural Center on the Arapahoe campus. It led to the establishment of SOCA, Students of Color and Allies. It also led to the establishment of non-gendered bathrooms. A few initiatives around inclusivity of diversity were brought about by that. So I would encourage students to use their voice and their power as customers of a product to influence the administration and the faculty to be more inclusive, and continue to advocate for that via sensitive, respectful emails to chairs, letters or emails to the president, and sensitively nudging their professors towards inclusivity. Specifically, as members of a cohort, students can be receptive and not invalidating to the experiences that BIPOC or Black students are having, or the experiences that their Black or BIPOC faculty are having with Naropa University. I am the only Black professor that I know of in the graduate collective, but there are other BIPOC professors. But hearing from a student that they appreciate the love that I'm giving them in preparation, in scholarship that I'm bringing, in the breadth of wisdom and experience I'm bringing as a Black father, or as a person generally, or a Black researcher, getting that affirmation from the students is helpful in itself. In addition, the students can promote to the admissions office that, and this gets into the other question, what can Naropa do? Naropa can start to reach out more and try to recruit more BIPOC folks to campus through going to high school, college fairs in places that are more diverse ethnically than Boulder, so maybe going to Commerce City or Aurora and trying to show that Naropa is a place that understands, if they do at some point, that if 5% of the general population or the non-BIPOC population is mystical and transpersonal, then that's the same for the Black community as well. Ultimately, I would love to see the field of psychology generally and Naropa University, however, also have about 13% Black students represented here, because that is the national average according to the census. Also represented in faculty would be great as well. 13% seems like the baseline that we can go from.
Can you speak a little bit about the long-term psychological and physical effects of racial trauma on Black people?
I will try. It will show up differently, if at all, which it often does, for every Black person. And that's one way that we are also diverse as Black people, right? We think differently, we eat different foods at times, we experience the magical or the transpersonal differently, and we also transmit or process our trauma differently as well. For me, I can speak to, it shows up as a deep sadness and distrust. And it shows up as a constant destabilizer that requires almost constant integration or processing, to use the same word again. And it often is insidious in the sense that when something does happen to me that is aggression or microaggression, another added impact is the unknown, right? I'm often unaware of someone's intention, or if racism is behind their intention. So I spend a lot of time trying to protect them from feelings of guilt by assuming that they did not mean to impact me in the way that they did, which is me bypassing for them, which leads me to continue to put down more and more. That then requires more transmission or processing from me that doesn't feel safe to do very often in my life, especially in mainly white communities and in a society that has deemed my passion as irrational anger. In terms of as a professor in my professional role, the historical trauma shows up as when I'm feeling invalidated by the students or by my colleagues, or when I'm feeling not respected, the breadth of wisdom and experience I have, feeling devalued. It triggers me to a place of doubt that I also believe is informed by historical trauma Black people have experienced, of being invalidated and doubted as intellectuals, competent contributors to our society.
How would you define actually racial trauma? And how does it differ from other forms of trauma specifically?
Skin tone is connected to this concept of race that I see as a pseudoscientific construction, but its impact is not pseudo. It's very salient and heavy and real. That being said, melanin is one gene and everyone has it. It is more active in people whose more recent descendants come from a place that was really hot and sunny, called El Kabulan or Africa. We all have common ancestors in Africa, but that doesn't seem to be enough to stop people from being racist against people that look more similar to the original people of the planet. Control and manipulation of the body and controlling the means of production is where racism comes from in the United States of North America. And in controlling the means of production by justifying a hierarchy around melanin activity, the United States of North America has become an incredibly wealthy place that then often uses that wealth to harm black and brown people around the world.
So how do you think those historical and systemic factors, such as racism that you mentioned, generational trauma, affect black mental health today?
You know, when you're running a race, it can be easier to get to the finish line when there's not hurdles. So I believe we're all efforting to have physical health, spiritual health, and mental health to achieve that in an effort to, frankly, sustain balance and peace, and maybe even life, if we'd like to, on the planet. Racism is a barrier and a hurdle that makes achieving and sustaining mental health, spiritual health, and physical health harder in every way. There is a potent pride that comes from overcoming these hurdles and overcoming racism as much as one can overcome them, which has its limits. Because in me personally, continuing to get up every day and show up as fully as I can does not alone end racism. But it does help me process it and show up for my family, for my colleagues, for students at my job in a more present way. The durability that I have had to muster throughout my life, and that darker skinned folks even have to muster more of, I would give that up. I'd give that characteristic up in an instant to have never experienced racism.
What would you say are some emerging areas, research areas in black mental health that excite you?
Work with PTSD and PTSS, post-traumatic slave syndrome, which is just a syndrome at the moment, not considered by the DSM-5. And maybe pathologizing our response to slavery might not be the best idea, seeing as how the APA and this field, what they do with pathology. That being said, it might open up some avenues to justify further research or the creation of modalities that specifically support folks whose ancestors have experienced slavery and who hold on to, in an epigenetic way, this intergenerational trauma. But in supporting people in managing their PTSD and PTSS while our society hopefully evolves towards stopping to be racist, I do believe that there's a lot of efficacy, and there has been a few studies, mainly done in Mexico, using iboga, which is a African sacred plant medicine similar to ayahuasca or psilocybin from the Gabon region, that was brought to the Gabon region by the Pygmy peoples from the Congo region in more central Africa. It was used, its efficacy historically was to support folks, members of the community or the civilization in pre-colonized, because Gabon was colonized by the French, but in pre-colonized Gabon, it was used by the peoples of that region to combat substance use disorder that arose when some of the folks in the community were taking bark, the certain bark from a specific tree, and brewing it into sort of a intoxicating substance, but it had addictive properties. So in a collective communal way, iboga was used ceremonially. The whole community would come together to help heal these folks that were having what we now would call substance use disorder from over-ingestion of this root-based toxicant. So yes, it has efficacy for substance use disorder, and my mother was, murdered in 1993 over a dispute over a substance, crack cocaine. I was born when my mother had been using PCP, which maybe explains a lot, and cocaine. And my ex-wife, had deep addiction that she picked up from Midwestern white men mainly to methamphetamines that had led to her being gone for about 13 and a half years of my time parenting my children without their mother, and led to me adopting her children with these white men because they were addicted to substances and not able to provide for their children that are now my adopted children that I love and care for. So of course, iboga being used to support people overcoming substance use disorder is personal to me. And with that substance, maybe my mother would be alive, maybe my children would have had a mother, and so forth. But there's also been some efficacy in research around iboga supporting folks in managing PTSD and PTSS. And this type of research excites me deeply. Working on a research proposal that will come when I get done with some other proposals and things I'm doing in my life right now. And once iboga gets grandfathered in Colorado as a legal substance, I hope to work with the Blackadelics movement in Denver, which are Black folks that engage with psychedelics, and other groups from around the country to kind of get that pilot research off the ground. That's what excites me today.
This is an unexpected question, but hearing all of that, I'm thinking of your dissertation.
Yeah.
Would you care to share with the class a little bit about the topic of your dissertation and what you've been finding out?
Yeah, the topic of my dissertation, well, I did research on Black single fathers called solo fathers, fathers that had 51% or more time spent with their children without the biological mother involved. And their personal experiences like stress, anxiety, joy, love, passion, but also their transpersonal experiences like the unitive nature that comes with dissolving into your child, clear cognizance, right? So feeling like something was going on with your child, going up into the bedroom and seeing them about to jump off the bed and twist their ankle or something. Loss of ego that comes with parenting as a black single father, and a whole bunch of other themes that I don't want to bore the class with at the moment. But the purpose was to investigate the assumption that parenting is a transpersonal practice like holotropic breath work or meditation or hypnosis, et cetera, and my study did show that to be the case, that parenting is a transpersonal practice.
One final question, we still have some time, yes?
Yeah.
What gives you hope for the future of Black mental health and resilience?
My faith in the power of my ancestral and dependent counsel, the spiritual counsel that holds me up, is what gives me optimism about the future of Black transpersonal mental health. I have an optimism that my great-great-grandchildren will exist in a world where their Blackness is not a determining factor on how they are treated, and their Blackness only has a positive and affirmative impact on their mental, psychological, spiritual, and somatic experience as people. And the people I've met, the folks, Dr. Williams, my PhD chair, Dr. Dieterville from CIIS, and many others, Dr. Ben Johansen, rest in peace, Dr. Chikanta Diop, some of the prominent folks in the Kemetic or Pan-Afrocentric construction, putting together African theoretical frameworks to inform research and modalities. Dr. Leary, the person who established PTSS, people like that give me an optimism about the future, and just knowing that the misrepresentation of Blackness by Drake and Little Dirk and all, not what we are, really. The misconception by the media, the mistreatment by the current administration around DEI and what that means to us, for us to be acknowledged as valid members of society and not invalidated or diminished to justify oppression and marginalization is coming. And I'm proud of the members of the Black community that I've grown up around, that I've been able to observe throughout my life. And that gives me an optimism about our future as Black people. But no, I'm not optimistic about the future of the United States of North America at this moment in time.